We continue now at the top of Daf Tazayin on Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 16b. This daf is sponsored by David Grossman. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you'd like to sponsor an Amud or Daf, see the description box below, and see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. On the previous Amud of Yosef asked what pasuk tells us in terms of the order of who would be consulted when going out to war, and the Gemara now brings the pasuk. Rav Yosef brings the pasuk in Divrei Hayamim. The pasuk says, "V'acharei Achitofel ben Ayahu ben Yehoyada ve'Eviasar v'Sar Tzivah lemelech Yov." It says after Achitofel was ben Ayahu ben Yehoyada and Eviasar, and the general to the king Yoav. And so we see from this pasuk, as the Gemara will now explain, the order of consultation in terms of going out to war. Achitofel ze Yoetz. Achitofel, that refers to the advisor, the person they would go to in terms of determining whether it was a good idea to go to war. V'chein hu omer, likewise it says in the pasuk, V'atzas Achitofel asher yoatz v'gomer. It talks about the counsel, the advice that was given by Achitofel. Uven Ayahu ben Yehoyada, when it says ben Ayahu ben Yehoyada, Zu Sanhedrin, that refers to the Sanhedrin. He was the head of the Sanhedrin. Eviasar elu urim v'tumim. Eviasar, which refers to the Kohen, that refers to the urim v'tumim. V'chein hu omer, and the Gemara then says, likewise it says in the pasuk, Uven Ayahu ben Yehoyada, that ben Ayahu ben Yehoyada ala kreisi v'ala plesi. He was over the kreisi and plesi. One understanding of this is it means to say the kreisi and plesi is the Sanhedrin, because ben Ayahu ben Yehoyada was the head of the Sanhedrin. Rashi has a slightly different explanation. It says Ve'Eviasar elu urim v'tumim v'chein hu omer Uven Ayahu ben Yehoyada ala kreisi v'ala plesi hu l'mala mehem. In the pasuk it has ben Ayahu ben Yehoyada before the kreisi u'plesi v'kodem hayolem. He was before them. Umidasamach b'kra kaman. In the first pasuk, the order was Eviasar basar ben Ayahu. Eviasar is after ben Ayahu in the pasuk, and Eviasar is a reference to the urim v'tumim, as we said. So Shema Mina. So we see from that Eviasar hainu kreisi u'plesi. Eviasar must be the same as kreisi and plesi. According to Rashi, kreisi and plesi is a reference to the urim v'tumim. In any case, the Gemara continues, V'lama nikra shemon kreisi u'plesi. Why are they called the kreisi u'plesi? Whether that refers to the Sanhedrin being called kreisi u'plesi, or whether it refers to the urim v'tumim. Why is it called kreisi u'plesi? Kreisi shekorsin divrein kreisi, because they issued a clear-cut ruling. It issued a clear-cut directive. U'plesi shemufloin ma'asein. And plesi means it was wondrous. Its actions were wondrous. V'achar kach. And what does it say afterwards in the pasuk? It says Sar hasaval melech Yoav. It says the general Yoav. That refers to going out to war. So again, that's the order of consultation in terms of going out to war. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yitzchak Breder of Ada, V'amri lo Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Avudimi. Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rav Ada, says, and some have the version that Rav Yitzchak bar Avudimi says, Mikra, where do we see in the pasuk this idea that a kinor, the kinor is a kind of harp, a lyre that was hanging above the king of David HaMelech to wake him up, that we said in the previous summon. Where do we see that in the pasuk? It says Ura Kavodi, it says awaken my glory, Ura HaNavel v'kinor, and it says that the navel and the kinor, again that refers to the harp and the lyre, or Ira HaShachar, they get up to awaken me in the morning. Rashi explains, Mikra de kinor talui al mitaso shel David. From where do we see that a kinor was hanging over the bed of David HaMelech? Umekitzo leDavid mishnaso, and it would awaken him from his sleep. T'chsiv ira hashachar ani ma'orer hashachar. Ira hashachar means I awake in the morning, meaning I'm up early. V'lo keshar melachim, not like other kings. Shashachar kodem ma'orer, and that first the morning comes and wakes them up. David HaMelech is saying he wakes up earlier. He wakes up before it is morning. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Vein mosifan ala ir, we can't add on to the city, and we cannot add on to the gates of the Beis HaMikdash without the Bezdin of 71. And the Gemara says, Menani Mili, from where do we know this, that we need the Bezdin of 71 to add on to build in the Beis HaMikdash? Amar Rav Shimi bar Chia, Amar Kar Rav Shimi bar Chia says that the pasuk says, Kechol asher ani mara oscha is tavnes HaMishkan. It says, like everything I show you, referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, in terms of the pattern of the Mishkan. So you see that Moshe Rabbeinu was in charge in terms of determining the building of the Mishkan. V'chein tasu ledoros habarn. It says v'chein tasu, that means ledoros habarn, for the future generations. The Bezdin of 71 takes the place of Moshe Rabbeinu. They're involved in these kinds of expansions and constructions. And the Gemara continues, Mesav Rava. Rava asks the following question. The Brisa says, Kol hakelim sha'asa Moshe, with regards to all of the vessels that Moshe made, mishichasan mikadshan. So it was through the anointing them with the oil that made them holy. Mikan va'elach, but from then on, meaning after the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, avodasan mechanchasan, it was the using of the kelim. When they would actually use the kelim, that would be mechanech them, that would bring them into the service of the Beis HaMikdash. And so the Gemara says, V'yamai, now why do we make a distinction in this price? So we're saying what Moshe Rabbeinu did was different than what we do in future generations. generations. Name of v'chein tasu l'doros haboin. We should say that the pasuk says v'chein tasu, and we should do the same thing in future generations. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu used the oil to anoint the kalim, so too we should use the oil to anoint the kalim. Just like we said in terms of the expansion, the building of the Beis Hamikdash. And the Gemara says no, shani hasam. It's different over there when it comes to the kalim. Diyamar kra, because the pasuk says vayim shachem vayikadesh osam. It says that he anointed them in order to make them holy, and we learn from that pasuk that osam b'meshicha, only they are b'meshicha, are with the oil, with the anointing, with the oil. V'lo l'doros b'meshicha, but when it comes to the future generations, they do not use the anointing oil for this purpose. But the Gemara continues ve'ema. But why don't we say that? What does the word osam mean? It means osam b'meshicha. It means they are anointed with the oil in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu. Uledoros, and for future generations, maybe what we should say is iba meshicha, iba avoda. Either we use the anointing oil, or we use the service using the kalim in the Beis Hamikdash as a way to be mechanech osam. Maybe it means either or. How do you know that you're not doing it with meshicha at all? And the Gemara says, Amar Papa says, Amar Kra, it's because the pasuk says, Asher Yesharsu Bam Bakodesh, that you serve with them in the Kodesh, and we understand that to mean Hakas of Tolan B'Sheirus. The pasuk is saying that it's dependent upon the actual service, meaning for future generations, the way that we're mechanech the kalim is through actual service and not through the oil. But the Gemara says, well, if we have that pasuk, ela osam lamali, so then what do we need the pasuk of osam for? We just used the pasuk of osam before to say osam and meshicha v'lo ledoros b'meshicha, but now we already have the pasuk of asher yisharsu bam b'kodesh, and the Gemara says, no, we need both psukim, because ilav osam, if not for the pasuk which says osam, have amina ledoros b'meshicha uva avoda. One might have thought that in future generations you have to use both meshicha and avoda. You have to use avoda, asher yisharsu bam b'kodesh, but maybe you have to use meshicha as well. Dachsiv v'chein tasu, because it says again, v'chein tasu, you should do the same in future generations, just like you did earlier. That's what I would have thought. So kasav rachmana osam, that's why the pasuk says osam, means to say osam b'meshicha v'lo ledoros b'meshicha. They, those original kalim, they're anointed with the oil, but in future generations, we don't use the oil for that purpose. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, ve'nosin sanhedros v'chula, we only establish smaller Sanhedrins through the Sanhedrin of Shivim v'Yechad, through the Sanhedrin of 71. The Gemara says, Menolan, from where do we know this? It's just like we find by Moshe Rabbeinu Deuki Sanhedros. He was the one that established the smaller Sanhedrins. Moshe b'makom shivim v'chad kohen. Moshe was in the place of the Bezin of 71. So for future generations, they are established by the Bezin of 71. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Minayin Shema Midin Shoftim Li Yisrael. From where do we know that we establish judges for Klal Yisrael? Talmud Lomer, the pasuk says Shoftim Titain, that we have to establish the judges. Shotrim Li Yisrael Minayin. From where do we know to establish officers? Talmud Lomer Shotrim Titain, the pasuk says Shotrim Titain, you have to establish the officers. Shoftim L'chol Shevet V'Shevet Minayin. From where do we know judges for every tribe? Talmud Lomer Shoftim Lishvatecha. It says Shoftim are for your tribes. Shotrim L'chol Shevet V'Shevet Minayin. From where do we know that you have officers for every tribe? Talmud Lomar Shotrim L'Shvatecha. The pasuk says officers for your shvatim. And Shoftim L'chol Ir Vo'ir Minayin. From where do we know judges for every city? Talmud Lomar Shoftim L'Sharecha. It says you have judges for your gates. It means for your cities. Shotrim L'chol Ir Vo'ir Minayin. From where do we know officers for each of your cities? Talmud Lomar Shotrim L'Sharecha. The pasuk says you have to have officers for your gates. And the Brisa continues, Rabbi Yehuda says, Echad Memuna Al Kul, and you have to have one set of judges, one court that's appointed over all of them. Shenemar Titen L'chal, like it says, you establish for yourself. And Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, Lishvatecha V'Shaftu, it says, for your tribes you judge. Mitzvah B'Shevet Lodan Es Shifto, there's a particular mitzvah for each tribe to judge the members of that tribe. And Rashi explains, Deuki Sanhedros, to establish the smaller Sanhedrins, Ba'atzas Yisro. Moshe did this by the advice of Yisro. Moshe Yeshofet V'dayan Al Pi Hadibor, and Moshe was a judge through the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'shakal K'Sanhedrin Gedol Sheb Yerushalayim, so he was equivalent of the Sanhedrin Gedol in Yerushalayim. And Shotrim Gul Yurim Chovtim V'maklos, these are like officers who hit with the sticks. Al Pi HaShoftim, they do it by the instructions of the judges. They carry out the will of the judges. L'chol mi she'eino shameya, for anyone who doesn't listen. Echad Memuna Al Kul, and the Brisa then said that you have one court over all these smaller courts, Zu Sanhedrin Gedola, that refers to the Sanhedrin Gedola, and Mitzvah B'Shevet Lodan Es Shifto. And finally, the Brisa brought the opinion, again, first was the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, that you have the Echad Memuna Al Kul and the Sanhedrin Gedola over all of the smaller courts, and then you had the opinion of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel that it's a mitzvah for each Shevet to judge the members of its Shevet, V'lo Yelchu B'nei Shevet Zeh Lebezin Shel Shevet Acher. People from one shevet shouldn't go to a court from another shevet. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "Vein osin ir hanidachas." We can't designate a city as an ir hanidachas. That's when the entire city worships avodah zarah. We can't do that designation unless we have the bezdin of shivim v'echad, the bezdin of 71. And the Gemara says, "Menahani mili." From where do we know this? Amar Rabbi Chia bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Chia bar Yosef says that Rabbi Yoshia says, "Diamar krutz," because the pasuk says, "V'hotzeisa es ha'ish hahu o es ha'isha hahi." It says you're going to take out that man or woman who worships avodah zarah, and we understand that to mean ish v'isha atamotzi l'sharecha, an individual, a man or a woman, you could take out to your gates to be judged by the smaller courts. V'iatamotzi kolo ir kula l'sharecha, but you don't take out an entire city to your gates. Rather, you have to use the bezdin of 71 when it's the entire city. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "Einos an ir hanidachas bisvar." You can't make an ir hanidachas in a city that is along the border of Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara says, "My time, and what's the reason?" Mikir b'cha amar achman. It says from within, from your midst. V'lo min hasfar, but you can't do it if the city is along the border. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "V'lo shalosh." You can't have three ir hanidachases, three cities be ir hanidachas that are right next to each other. And the Gemara says, "Dichsiv," because it's written in the pasuk achas. It says it's one. You're allowed to designate one city. Avol osin achas oshtayim. So you could do one city, but not three. But the Gemara says you could do one or two cities. And how do we know that? Dichsiv, because it's written in the pasuk arech. It says your cities in plural. So one or two cities that are next to each other can be designated as ir hanidachas, but not three cities. And the Gemara continues, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, achas, it says in the pasuk again, one city. Achas v'lo shalosh. We understand that to mean one city and not three cities. Atza omer achas v'lo shalosh. You're saying one city and not three. Oeino ela achas v'lo shtayim. Maybe what it really means is one city and not two. How do you know two? How do we know that you can even make two cities as ir hanidachas? And the Brisa says, Kishu omer arecha, when it says arecha in plural, your cities, hare shtayim omer. So we see that we can designate two cities as ir hanidachas. Hamani mekayim achas. So what does it mean when it says in the pasuk achas? It means achas v'lo shalosh. It means one and not three. There's a problem. You're not allowed to designate three cities as an ir hanidachas, as we said. And the Gemara continues, Zimnanam Rav. Sometimes Rav said, Bebezin echad hu deinos, and it's only in one court that you can't designate three cities as ir hanidachas. Ha b'shnayim u'shlosha batei dinim. But if you'd have two or three courts, so then osin, so then they could do it. V'zimnanam Rav. But sometimes Rav said, Afilu b'shnayim u'shlosha batei dinim. Even if it's two or three courts, li'olam ein osin. You're never allowed to do it. And the Gemara says, my time at Rav. What's the reason of Rav? Mishum karcha, because of baldness. What it means is if that you designate too many cities as ir hanidachas, you're going to have a large desolate area in Eretz Yisrael, and that is problematic. And the Gemara continues, Amar Reish Lakish says, Lo shanu ela b'makom echad. All of this is only true in one place. Aval b'shnayim u'shlosha mekomos osim. But let's say it's two or three separate places where these cities are located, then that's fine. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, einos, and you can't do that either. Mishum karcha, again, because of desolation. We can't have too much desolation in Eretz Yisrael. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Kavasi Rabbi Yochanan. We have a brisa that supports Rabbi Yochanan. Ein osin shalosh ayoros menudachos be'Eretz Yisrael. You're not allowed to make three ir hanidachas cities in Eretz Yisrael. Aval osin osam shtayim, but you can do two. Kagon achas beYehuda v'achas beGalil. For example, let's say you designate one in Yehuda, in the territory of Yehuda, and one in the territory of the Galil. Aval shtayim beYehuda shtayim beGalil. But let's say two in the territory of Yehuda or two in the territory of Galil. Ein osin, that you're not allowed to do. Usmucha l'svaran, if the city is near the border, afilo achas ein osin, even to do one city near the border and make it an ir hanidachas, you're not allowed to do that. My time, and what's the reason you're not allowed to do that? Shema yishmu nachrim v'yachrivu es Eretz Yisrael. We're afraid that the nachrim, the non-Jews, might hear and they'll destroy Eretz Yisrael because you're going to have desolate cities along the border. The Gemara says, v'tepikli de mikir b'cha amar achmana v'lo min asvar. But why not just say from the pasuk we quoted above? It says mikir b'cha, in your midst, and not along the border. Why are we giving this other reason that maybe the nachrim will hear and destroy Eretz Yisrael? And the Gemara says to that, Rabbi Shimon, because this is following Rabbi Shimon, the Darish time at the Kra, he darshans what is the reason of the pasuk. It's true, it is learned from the pasuk, but why does the pasuk say that you can't do it near the border? The reason is Shema Yishmu Nachrim v'Yachrivu es Eretz Yisrael. And Rashi explains, Bebezin Echad, again, the Gemara suggested that in one court it's a problem to make 3 cities as Ir Hanidacha cities, but if it would be more than one court, then it would be okay. Calls Mancha Sanhedrin Zu Kayama. Rashi says what that means is, Bezin Echad means as long as this Sanhedrin is around. Avol Mesu Elu, but let's say all of these judges have died, Vinismanu Acherim, and now others were appointed, that's already a new court. So then Osin, so then you are allowed to designate again even 3 cities. And then we said, B'makom Echad, in one area, what would that mean? Kagon Begalil or Yehuda, for example, in the territory of Galil or Yehuda, as the Gemara said. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, Sanhedrin Gadol Lahaisa, the Sanhedrin, it was composed of 71 judges according to the Rabbanan, and Rabbi Yehuda says it's 70 judges. The question is whether we count Moshe as well. And the Gemara says, My time of the Rabbanan da Amriu Moshe al Gabe, and what's the reason of the Rabbanan that they say that Moshe is along with them, is counted? So you have 70 elders, and then you also have Moshe, you have 71. What is their source? Amar Kra, the Pasuk says, V'siyatzvu sham, and they will stand over there, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph.